I'll answer the question. Yes, we are the largest, Susan. Well, it's a real treat to be with you here this afternoon. Susan, thanks for those wonderful words about American Express and your kind introduction. But it's a treat. I have the opportunity once in a while to travel around and speak to some audiences in the course of growing our company at 1-800-Flowers, and I get to speak to audiences around the country and increasingly around the world. But it's a treat not to have to worry about having an accent. Because those of us here in New York don't have accents, but some people in other parts of the country think that we do, and I'm frankly very sensitive to it because if you do any kind of TV work at all, sometimes you get funny little comments and emails from people about your accent. But I frankly have been, just between us, working with an elocution coach to overcome the last vestiges of a slight Queens, Brooklyn accent that I have. Because he's from Long Island. And I seem to be regressing just a little bit. You know, I know what you're thinking. You got these two powerhouses, 150-year-old companies, pillars of the business community here, New York Times and the American Express Company. And surely, for a wonderful event like this, they were going to go to the top for a luncheon speaker today. And so you're wondering, why not Donald Trump? No, they didn't ask the Donald. And why not ask Bill Gates? And no, they didn't ask Bill, nor did they ask Martha Stewart. They went right to the top and got you a florist. And obviously they wanted someone who's made lots of mistakes that we can all learn from, and I fit that bill. And I fit the other criteria, which is they wanted somebody who was really, really cheap. So what does this florist have to say to you today about growing a business in today's technologically explosive era, where we have PDAs and iPods and the new iTVs that Apple introduced yesterday and every kind of computer device that we could have ever imagined? And the message that I would tell you is that life doesn't run on batteries. And now my buddy, the Donald, would call his remarks his strategies for success. And clearly Martha would understandably refer to her comments as her recipe or ingredients for success. But because you got the florist, I'm going to talk to you about my seeds for success. Now, Susan asked me the other day, she said, Jim, you know, I know you started out as a social worker, but how did you first get interested in the flower business? And it brought me back, I guess, to my first realization. I didn't grow up in the flower business, as many of us who are florists have. But I guess my first recollection, Susan, now that I had a few days to think about it, is I was in high school. I went to high school in Brooklyn. I grew up in Queens. And went to one of those dances we used to have. And I met this nice girl. And I don't know if it was my first date, but it seemed like my first official date, where I'd have to go and take the Q10 bus up through Queens to the E and the F train, take that to Roosevelt Avenue, then take the IRT over to Woodside to pick up this gal, Margaret. And we were going to go to the movies at the RKO Keats. And then afterwards, we were going to go to Jan's Ice Cream Parlor. So I was a nervous wreck. And I remember once I took the Q10 bus up, I went down, and a buddy of mine, Joey, worked in the flower shop there in the mezzanine level of the subway in Kew Gardens, Union Turnpike. I said, Joe, can you make me up a bouquet? I'm going to go take this girl out to the movies and all, and I heard that's a good thing to do. He goes, oh, it's a great thing to do. So he made up a really, really hideous bouquet. And because we were friends, he did the extra things like the spray glue and the glitter on the gladiolas. It was, you know, really horrific. So now I get to Woodside, and I get to Margaret's house, and she lives on the 3rd floor of this beautiful garden complex, also known as a project. And I go up the stairs, and my knees are shaking, my hands are sweaty, and I don't know if the paper's ripping because of the moisture on the stems or the sweat on my palms. And I have this bouquet, and my hands are trembling, and I ring the doorbell, and Margaret opens the door, and she sees the bouquet, and she breaks out into this big, wide smile. She takes the bouquet and gives it a big whiff, and then puts her arm around me, brings me over and kisses me on the cheek, and I was startled and stumbled away, and she goes, what, did I do something wrong? I said, no, wait here, I'm going for more flowers. It was then I knew I had to get into the business where I could get this stuff wholesale. So let me take you back just a little bit in terms of the history. Susan was kind enough to mention that we're in business 30 years this past spring, And here I am working as a social worker at St. John's out in Rockaway Beach, which is a wonderful thing to do, and I loved the work. But, and I'll tell you more about that later, but I don't know if you know this, but people who work in the not-for-profit social work field don't make a lot of money. And Mary Lou and I had married at that point, and she turned out to be incredibly productive, and we were knocking out children quickly. And they wanted to do some really strange things, these kids. They wanted to eat and buy clothes and go to school. And so I was always doing things on the side. My dad was a small businessman. He had a painting contracting business in Brooklyn and Queens where we painted funeral homes, schools, churches, synagogues, which bores the hell out of my kids because every time I drive, I painted that church, I painted that school. And my youngest son, Matthew, here with us today will tell you that he is sick of knowing where every church, every school in Queens and Brooklyn is. But growing up in that small business background, I was always doing those kinds of things. And I was looking for a retail business to get involved in. Because in the neighborhood I grew up in, which was South Ozone Park in Queens, our heroes were policemen and firemen. And there were a few people who would put on a suit and go to the city, but we had no idea what they did. And then we had our entrepreneurial role models. First of all, we didn't know the word entrepreneur, and we certainly couldn't spell it, and today I'm still challenged. But the business role models we had were basically small store owners, small business people, store owners, shopkeepers. So there was one other entrepreneurial role model in our neighborhood, but his name was John Gotti, and my father didn't want me to pursue that kind of a career, although it did look quite lucrative. And so I was looking around for something retail to get into. Now here I am always working second jobs, and just a few blocks from here I'm working as a bartender. I'm fulfilling a genetic requirement for an Irish Catholic kid from Queens, tending bar on First Avenue. And I come out of there one night after we closed up with a buddy of mine, and he bumps into a buddy of his outside, and we get into a conversation. He says he's got this new business scheme he's going to go pursue, and he's going to be selling his little flower shop across the street. So I called him up a few days later and said, Nick, we met the other night. Do you mind, if you don't have a buyer yet, maybe I'd like to come and work there a couple of weekends to see if I like the business. I said, sure. So I did, and I liked it. And I scraped together with some loans and some money that I had, $10,000 to buy this 700 square foot flower shop on First